I give the floor to Pakistan.
Thank you. Thank you, Co-Chair. I would like to start by acknowledging the splendid work that was done by Ambassador Maschik and yourself over the past 2 years. We will miss Ambassador Maschik, but we are very glad to see you are holding the fort and guiding our process. Co-Chair, everyone is agreed that Security Council reform is necessary and that it should be achieved as soon as possible. But I'd like to also note that the Pact of the Future called for comprehensive measures to strengthen the entire United Nations system. The actions listed in the Pact call for strengthening the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, and the Peace-Building Commission as well. And I think that we should all focus on moving on all fronts as far as the reform of the United Nations bodies is concerned. We attach importance to the process that we are following. We do not believe that we are at the present moment in a stage where we can launch text-based negotiations or set some sort of an artificial deadline for the conclusion of our discussions. One of my colleagues has mentioned the need to reflect new realities. But the realities that we reflect in a council expansion of permanent members would again freeze the council at a particular time, as it is frozen in the 1945 framework. Any expansion of permanent members would freeze the council at that moment. It is only through the process of elections that the new realities that constantly change can be reflected in the composition of the Security Council, not by adding new permanent members. Our discussions for the Pact of the Future and in the IGN last year revealed where the convergences are and where the divergences are. There is convergence on priority for Africa. There is convergence on expanding the membership of developing countries. There is a convergence on the need for representation of regional and cross-regional groups. And these are convergences that we can build on and that have been confirmed in the models for Security Council reform that have been presented. But these discussions and the presentation of models has also revealed the divergences. And these are considerable divergences on the size of the council, on the issue of the categories of membership, on regional representation, on the veto, and on even on working methods where there is a large convergence, there are still areas of divergence, and these have been reflected in our discussions here today. The discussion on working methods, Co-Chair, is not marginal to the reform of the Security Council. As was famously said, process is substance. And the working methods of the Council impact on its outcomes and its processes. My delegation has proposed a number of steps that could be taken to ensure improvement in the working methods of the Council. These have not all been reflected in Note 507, although there have been some improvements. We need several things. We need, first of all, transparency, and transparency requires open meetings, the application of Rule 48 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure of the Security Council, more interactive open meetings, not set-piece statements that are made without any thought to interaction and action by the Council. There is, most importantly, the need for democracy. And that democracy can be inducted through the role of elected members, not permanent members. We need to have a larger role for the elected members and to break the oligopoly of the P5 in the Security Council. And this is manifest in at least 4 areas. Firstly, the pen holdership. There is an imbalance in the holding of pens between the P5 and the E10. And there is also an imbalance in the holding of pens between and among the P5, where some members hold a majority of the pens, and there is one permanent member who holds no pen and has been prevented from exercising pen holdership on one issue quite recently. So I think there is a need to review the whole process, and I believe that the Security Council's working group will look into this, and we hope this group will contribute and support this reform of the pen holdership. Secondly, the issue of selection of chairs of subsidiary bodies. Again, these are arbitrarily vetoed in certain cases. Arbitrarily, with no reason and no transparency. There must be a greater transparent process for selection or rejection of a chair for various groups. Certain groups cannot monopolize areas that are critical. Thirdly, the issue of documentation. Our Algerian friends have talked about the access, equal access to documentation. And they had to fight for it. It was not automatic. And fourthly, there is the issue of the revision of the periodicity of meetings of the subsidiary bodies. If you see the schedule, there are very few meetings. The subsidiary bodies exist, but they meet very infrequently. And there are good reasons for that, and we have to look into that. Thirdly, there is the issue of representation. There has to be a greater role for regional bodies and for cross-regional groups to be represented in all the interactive discussions of the Council. Fourthly, the issue of accountability. We have sanctions regimes which are applied and adopted almost automatically when an issue comes before the Council. It's as if you have a hammer and you see everything as a nail. So that sanctions regimes are applied, and these are often counterproductive. When you apply a sanctions regime on a country that is in internal conflict or in a crisis, it impacts on the population of that country and is counterproductive. And therefore, Pakistan has called for a review of the sanctions regimes of the Security Council. And we believe that the whole issue of how Chapter 7 resolutions are adopted needs to be reconsidered. Quite often, Chapter 7 resolutions are presented by P5 members or some P5 members without consultations with the E10 and imposed within 24, 48, 72 hours as such. And I think this is not an accountable process and needs to be reviewed. There is also the issue of detailed reportings, and I think my colleague from India mentioned it. We need more detailed reports from the Security Council to the General Assembly as to what has happened, what are the results of processes, not just a listing of issues. And lastly, the issue of the monitoring and implementation of Security Council resolutions. The Security Council has no mechanism by which it can monitor the implementation of resolutions. We need to find a mechanism, perhaps first and foremost a compendium of unimplemented resolutions of the Security Council. And here I would say there are no, old items do not die. The Security Council resolutions are not rescinded by non-implementation over time. Security Council resolutions under Article 25 are binding. Those have to be implemented. But we have no mechanism to review implementation. I think this is an important reform that we need in the Council. Co-chairs, we will work with you constructively, and we hope that we will find even greater convergence on the issue of working methods. This will be an important component of the convergences on the 5 clusters. Once we have convergence on the 5 clusters, we would be willing to move to the next stage of the negotiations, but I'm afraid we are not there yet. The divergences are still too large and too difficult at the moment. Thank you, Co-Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan.